poisoned! Don't eat it!
What is she saying?
Someone poisoned it! Run!
The restaurant froze in a single breath. The instant Mafia boss Victor Romano lifted his fork, the entire room seemed to hold still. Cold, untouchable, feared by every soul in the city, Victor was already raising the first bite of veal to his mouth when a scream ripped through the silence. "Don't eat that." Every head snapped toward the entrance. A little girl stood in the doorway. She was thin, trembling, soaked through by the rain. Her hair clung in messy strands to her face, her cheeks were red from the cold, but her eyes were filled with such raw terror that even men who had seen blood spilled for years went stiff. She took a step forward, nearly collapsing, and stretched out a shaking hand toward the plate. "Please," she rasped. "Don't eat it. I'm begging you." Victor's men instantly reached for their weapons. Customers ducked beneath the tables. No one dared to speak. But the boss raised one hand, and the room froze again. "Why?" he asked quietly. Very quietly. Dangerously quietly. "How do you know there is something in my food?" The girl's lips began to tremble. "Because," she whispered, "because I saw the man who poisoned it." A wave of shock rolled through the dining room. Victor's jaw tightened. His fork stopped only inches above the plate. His men exchanged glances. No one even dared to breathe. Then the girl said the sentence that turned the blood in the Mafia boss's veins to ice. "Yesterday, he tried to poison me too." In that moment, the most feared man in the city understood one thing. This was not just an assassination attempt. It was a message. A warning. And the key to the entire nightmare was standing right in front of him, barefoot, shivering, and soaked to the bone. Watch until the end, because what the Mafia boss uncovered after this turned the entire criminal world upside down. But before we continue, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's begin. Romano's was the kind of restaurant where deals were sealed in whispers and blood debts were paid over glasses of expensive wine. It stood on the corner of Fifth Avenue and Marlowe Street, with windows tinted black and an entrance guarded by men who never asked questions and never showed mercy. For 20 years, this place had been Victor Romano's private kingdom. His personal dining room. The place where business was done that would never appear in newspapers. Tonight was supposed to be special. A celebration. Victor had just closed the biggest weapons deal of his career. $3 million. The shipment would move through the port. Enough firepower to arm a small revolution. His organization was expanding, pushing aside rival families that had grown weak and careless. At 63 years old, while most men his age thought about retirement, Victor Romano was still building an empire. The dining room reflected his success. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light across polished mahogany tables. The walls were covered with paintings, each one worth more than an average person's home. Waiters in spotless white shirts moved between tables like ghosts, serving dishes prepared by a chef who had once cooked for European royalty. But success in Victor's world came with a price. Every handshake could hide betrayal. Every dinner could become the last. Trust was a luxury he could not afford. That was why someone always tasted his food first. That was why his security swept every room before he arrived. That was why he had survived so long in a business where most men died young. But tonight, the usual precautions had been relaxed. The restaurant was closed to outsiders. His most loyal lieutenants sat beside him. The head chef had served the family for 15 years. Everything seemed secure. Victor sat at his usual table in the center of the room, positioned so he could see every entrance and every exit. To his right sat Mark Tanner, his deputy and oldest friend. To his left sat Vince Carver, his enforcer, a man with more deaths on his hands than most wars. Across from him sat Eddie Brooks, the nervous little accountant who ran the money laundering operations. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the wine. They discussed expansion plans, territorial disputes, and the unpleasant necessity of removing certain competitors. Business. The kind of business that had made Victor Romano the most powerful man in the city. A waiter approached in perfect silence and placed Victor's favorite dish in front of him. Osso buco with saffron risotto. The meat fell from the bone. The sauce was thick, rich, and fragrant. It was a dish from his childhood. His mother used to make it before cancer took her away. Even killers have weaknesses. Victor lifted his fork. The silver flashed beneath the chandelier light. This was his ritual, His one quiet moment before returning to the violence that shaped his life. He reached for the tender meat, already savoring the anticipation. And then everything changed. The little girl's voice exploded through the room like a gunshot in church. Security protocols polished over decades collapsed in a single second. Men who had stared down gangsters and federal agents suddenly lost their balance because of a child. But Victor did not flinch. His dark eyes studied the girl with the intensity of a predator watching prey. She could not have been more than 8 or 9 years old. Her clothes were several sizes too large, hanging from her body like rags on a fence. Her sneakers had holes in them, and her socks showed through. But it was not the poverty that caught his attention. He had grown up among children like her. It was her stare. Despite her fear, despite the trembling that ran through her whole body, something sharp and alive burned in her eyes. She was not merely frightened. She was desperate. But she was thinking. "You saw who poisoned my food," Victor said, barely above a whisper. The whole room leaned forward to hear him. "Tell me his name." The girl's eyes darted around the room, moving over the faces of dangerous men who looked at her as if they were trying to decide whether she was a miracle or a threat. "I don't know his name," she said quietly, but firmly. "But I know what he looks like. And I know why he did it." Mark Tanner shifted in his chair. His hand moved automatically toward the pistol under his jacket. "Boss, this could be a trap. Someone may have sent her to." "Be quiet," Victor said without taking his eyes off the girl. "Let her speak." The girl took one uncertain step forward. Rainwater dripped from her soaked clothes onto the expensive carpet. "He is tall," she began. "About 5 feet 11. Brown hair, but gray on the sides. He has a scar on his left hand. Right here." She pointed to the space between her thumb and index finger. Victor's blood ran cold. He knew that scar. He had made it himself 20 years earlier with a broken bottle during a war over territory. A scar on the hand of a man who, according to every official record, had been buried long ago. "What else?" Victor demanded, and now there was steel in his voice. "He wears expensive suits, but they are too big for him, like he buys them with room to spare. And he has this habit. He keeps rubbing his fingers together when he is nervous." Every detail landed like a bullet. The man the girl was describing was Anthony Duke. Former partner. Former friend. And according to official records, a dead man buried in St. Mary's Cemetery 15 years ago. But if Tony was alive, if Tony was here in the city, then everything Victor believed was a lie. Every alliance. Every truce. Every carefully negotiated agreement. All of it had been built on a foundation of deception. And if Tony was moving against him now, after all these years, that meant someone had been planning this for a very, very long time. The girl continued, unaware that she had just rewritten the rules of a game she did not even understand. "Yesterday, he came to the place where I sleep, under the bridge near the old factory. He brought food. He said he wanted to help. But I saw him put something into it when he thought I wasn't watching. The same little bottle he used tonight." Victor's thoughts began racing. Why would Tony try to poison a homeless child? What would be the purpose? Unless it was not about the girl at all. Unless she had only been a test. A way to make sure the poison worked before using it on the real target. The realization hit Victor like a freight train. If Anthony Duke was alive, then the carefully staged killing that supposedly ended his life had been nothing but theater. Someone had helped him fake his death. Someone with access to morgue records, cemetery plots, and enough influence to make a body disappear without questions. That kind of operation required resources and connections far beyond street crime. Vince Carver leaned forward. His knuckles whitened around the edge of the table. "Boss, if that really is Tony, then we have a serious problem. Half the territories we control used to belong to him. If he has been preparing a comeback..." "Shut up," Victor snapped. But his mind was already moving 3 steps ahead. Tony knew his habits. His favorite restaurants. His security routines. Worse than that, he knew Victor's weaknesses. They had grown up in the same neighborhood. Learned the business from the same mentors. Shared secrets that could destroy both of them. The girl shifted from one foot to the other. Water still streamed from her clothes onto the Persian carpet. "There's something else," she said, almost too softly to hear. "When he was putting something in my food, he was talking on the phone. He said they needed to make sure the old man would be at Romano's tonight. He said everything had to happen exactly on time. Victor's blood turned to ice. The old man. That was what Tony used to call him during their partnership, even though there were only 5 years between them. Back then, it had been a joke. A sign of brotherhood. Now it sounded like a knife slowly twisting in his chest. But there was something even more disturbing. How did Tony know Victor would be here tonight? This dinner had only been arranged yesterday. A spontaneous celebration after the weapons deal. A short guest list. A secure private location. Someone inside had given Tony the information. Victor's gaze slowly moved across the faces of his most trusted men. Mark, beside him for 25 years. Vince, who had taken bullets for him 3 times. Eddie, keeper of financial secrets too dark for outsiders. One of them was a traitor. Or maybe all of them were. The girl coughed. The harsh sound cut through the silence of the room. She was getting worse by the minute. Her skin was pale and damp from the cold rain, but she stood straight, and her eyes stayed fixed on Victor with the same sharp attention he used to have as a child. A hungry look. Desperate, but not cowardly. "What is your name?" he asked. "Luna," she answered. "Luna Carter." "How long have you been living on the street, Luna?" Her chin lifted with a pride greater than her circumstances. 2 months. "Since my mom died." Something tightened in Victor's chest. A feeling he thought had died long ago, buried with whatever humanity he once possessed. This child had lost everything. She had been abandoned by the very system meant to protect her. And still, she had risked her life to save a stranger. A man who represented the worst parts of the world she was trying to survive. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you warn me? You don't know me. You owe me nothing." Luna's eyes filled with tears, but her voice did not break. Because nobody deserves to die like that. Scared and alone, not understanding what is happening. My mom died in the hospital. They wouldn't let me see her at the end. They said it was about paperwork. I don't want anyone else to feel that kind of fear. The room sank into a silence so heavy it felt alive. Here stood a child who had every reason to hate the world and let powerful men destroy each other while she fought to survive. Instead, she chose compassion. Not revenge. Mercy. And that lesson cut deeper than any blade Victor had ever faced. Mark cleared his throat nervously. "Boss, we need to move." "If Tony is making his play tonight, he already has," Victor interrupted. He pushed the untouched plate away. The poisoned meal now looked as deadly as a loaded gun. "The question is how deep this goes. How many people knew about this dinner? How many had access to the kitchen? How many knew exactly when I would take the first bite?" The questions hung in the air like smoke over a grave. Trust, the foundation of every criminal organization, had collapsed in minutes. And Victor had not been saved by a loyal soldier. Not by carefully vetted security. He had been saved by a homeless child who had nothing to lose and everything to lose. Eddie, the accountant, finally spoke. His voice trembled. "Mr. Romano, if there is a leak inside the organization, we need to find it fast. The shipment arrives tomorrow night. If Tony knows about that, then we are all dead men," Vince finished with grim calm. Victor stood slowly. Every movement was controlled, deliberate, despite the chaos raging inside him. He walked around the table and stopped directly in front of Luna, the tiny girl who had just overturned his world. Up close, he could see the sharp intelligence burning behind her dark eyes. She studied his face as if reading a book in a language only she understood. "Luna," he said softly, "I need you to tell me everything you remember about this man. Every detail, even the smallest one. Can you do that?" She nodded, then winced as another coughing fit hit her. He had a briefcase. Black leather with gold corners. And he kept looking at his watch. One of those expensive watches that shows the time in different countries. Victor's jaw tightened. A custom Patek Philippe. Only 12 of them existed in the world. Tony had bought his during their most successful year, when they controlled half the waterfront and money flowed like water. Victor knew because he had helped him choose it. What else? He had a car parked across from where I sleep. Big and black, with dark windows. I saw the license plate. It started with TD. Tony Duke. Even after 15 years of pretending to be dead, even while hiding in the shadows, the man could not resist signing his work. Classic Tony. Arrogant. Theatrical. Certain of his own invincibility. Some things never changed. But something else had changed. The Tony Victor remembered was impulsive. He acted on instinct, not strategy. This new Tony was patient. Methodical. Willing to wait 15 years for the perfect moment. That kind of transformation did not happen alone. Someone had trained him, guided him, helped him become a more dangerous enemy than he had ever been as a friend. Pieces of a massive conspiracy began to lock into place. Victor understood then that tonight's assassination attempt was only the opening move in a much larger game. A game where the stakes were not territory or money, but the survival of everything he had built. And the only person who could help him untangle this deadly knot was a 9-year-old girl who slept under bridges and lived on scraps. The irony would have been funny if it had not been so terrifying. Victor lowered himself to one knee until he was level with Luna's eyes. His expensive suit creased. His men went rigid. In 25 years, none of them had ever seen the boss show this kind of vulnerability. This kind of humanity. But something in this child had pierced the armor Victor had forged through decades of violence and betrayal. "Luna," he said quietly, softer than he had spoken in years, "you are safe. No one will touch you. But I need your help so no one else gets hurt. Can you help me?" The girl nodded, though her body still trembled from the cold, from fear, or from both. "The man who tried to poison you," Victor continued. "Did he say anything else? Did he mention other people? Other places?" Luna closed her eyes, concentrating. "He talked on the phone a lot. Always about timing and schedules. He mentioned some warehouse near the docks. He said everything had to happen before the ships arrived." Vince Carver and Mark Tanner exchanged a meaningful look. The warehouse district. That was exactly where the weapons shipment was supposed to arrive tomorrow night. If Tony knew about that operation, this was no ordinary assassination attempt. This was a plan to destroy Victor's entire empire. "Boss," Mark whispered. "If he knows about the shipment." "I heard her," Victor cut in sharply. He stood, his mind already calculating the next steps. "Eddie, contact our people at the port. I want security tripled at every warehouse. Vince, start working through the usual suspects. Everyone who had contact with Tony in the last 5 years, dead or alive. Apparently, those categories mean nothing anymore." "And the girl?" Vince asked, casting an uncertain glance at Luna. Victor looked at the child who had just saved his life. Maybe even his entire operation. She was still trembling. Still soaked through. Still looked as if she might collapse at any second. But her eyes did not leave his face. Calm. Steady. Waiting to discover what kind of man he really was. The old Victor would have seen her as a threat. A witness who knew too much. A loose end that needed to be cut away. In his world, sentiment got people killed, and mercy was a weakness enemies used immediately. But something had changed the moment Luna screamed her warning. Maybe it was the memory of his own childhood, when he had been a hungry boy on these same streets. Maybe it was the realization that true loyalty could not be bought and could not be beaten out of anyone with fear. It had to be earned. "The girl comes with us," Victor said. "She is under my protection." His men stared at him. In 25 years, no one had ever heard Victor Romano take personal responsibility for a civilian. But the tone of his voice left no room for argument. "Sir," Eddie began carefully, "bringing an outsider into our business could be..." "Could be what?" Victor's voice turned dangerously cold. "More dangerous than having a traitor inside my inner circle? More dangerous than walking blindly into an obvious trap?" The accountant fell silent. His face turned pale. Everyone in the room understood what he meant. If not for Luna, Victor would already be dead, and with him, any chance of exposing the conspiracy designed to wipe them out. Victor turned back to Luna. The girl had watched the entire exchange with the sharp attention of someone who had learned too young to read adults in order to survive. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Mark, tell the kitchen to prepare something safe for her. And bring dry clothes. Find something that fits." Victor paused, studying the girl's face. "Luna, I am going to ask you to do something. It may be frightening. But I promise you, you will be protected. Do you trust me?" The question hung in the air. A child who had every reason not to trust powerful adults was being asked to rely on one of the most dangerous men in the city. Luna looked around the room. The hardened criminals. The luxurious walls. The hidden weapons. Then she looked at him. "When I told you not to eat, you listened," she said simply. "That means you know how to listen."